Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here. I'd like to thank the Ruderman Foundation for the work that you're doing to improve the quality of life for people with disabilities, not only in the Jewish community, and not only here in the United States, but also in Israel and around the world. I got to meet some of the Ruderman family today, and I was honored. It's just an honor to be here, to spread my branches. To see my Special Olympics family up there in the corner. It's too bad I didn't get a chance to delegate with you this morning. Dr. Stein, who's here, Dr. Michael Stein, who used to work on the board with me. And also, last night to see Senator Harkin be here. In early 1990s, I tried to get the Nobel Peace Prize for Eunice Kennedy Shriver. I can't officially nominate her. But some folks from SOI and I decided that it was a great idea for her to receive the Nobel Prize. You know her work. You know of Sergeant Shriver's work. Children beyond 3, if they learn beyond the age of 3, they have a jump on education. The anti-poverty law, all done through Mr. Shriver, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, a woman who could have turned her back on society and say, no, I'm not interested in these people. But she decided to make that challenge and go against the grain of society and have a sporting organization. And she knew that the people that she was trying to show society say, and when society was saying, no, 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 these people can't do anything, she used sport as a vehicle to show the world what people with intellectual and physical disability can do. I'll talk about that later. But now, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. My life is chronicled in the movie, the Loretta Claiborne story in the year 2000. Well, there's some glitches in that movie. They said I didn't graduate from high school. Well, that was my mom's dream, was for Loretta Claiborne to graduate from high school and receive that glorious diploma that said Loretta Claiborne has completed her studies, not has attended, as most special education students would be recognized into the school. I was born in 1953, and yes, folks, I am 62 years old. I've been running 50 years of that 62 years of my life. So yes, I have more miles on my feet than some people have on their cars. So don't ask me to go barefoot, they're ugly. But I ran from anger into happiness. I remember the stories my mom told me. She was a big woman. And yes, she had a butt on her. And she knew how to strut that butt. But she also told me the story of her life. Being African American, being black. I didn't know about that whole thing about drinking from this fountain and that fountain. She told me, oh, Loretta, when I went to school, you turned the pages, and Mr. Hopewell, she went to an all-black school, would have you turn to page 5, and he would say, okay, what's this story on page 5? And another kid would say, there ain't no page 5 in my book. Remember, that's how people got treated, because of the color of their skin. I remember the story she told me, how the kids would go to the swimming pool, and they went to, is there any children in here? I hope not. Because all the black kids during the polio vaccine went to Cal Ship Run to swim. An old white farmer had that area, and he let the colored kids swim in there. They wasn't getting polio. So all the white kids who went to the pools who were closing were coming to Cal Ship Run. The horror stories that my mother had. But then she told me this story. As she had Hank, Alan, Debbie, then pop comes Loretta. The doctor looked at her and said, Miss Claiborne, this one won't make it. I'm just telling you straight up. She won't make it. She's going to have to be institutionalized. You know, when you put kids like this, if you're going to continue to have children, you better think twice. My mom and her big, broad self says, you take care of your job and having babies, and let me take care of mine. As time went by, she ended up with 9 children. 2 didn't make it into this world. Years later, she adopted another one. I'm like, well, you have room for another one. she would tell me the stories about myself. Kindergarten, and I remember some of these stories. Hitting kindergarten, I was held back. Well, I didn't walk till I was 4, and I was sent to school at 5. First grade, held back. Second grade, held back. Well, you know what happens. That kid gets teased. I was cross-eyed lion, bozo. Just name some of the names. It hurt. On top of that name, retard. That's the term they use. That's how they described us. I noticed there were children behind me last night, and I thought about those children with all kinds of different abilities. You notice I didn't say disabilities, because that word dis hurts. And I looked at those children, and I thought about my childhood. How we were all in one special education room down in the dark basement where the pipes clinked. Some of the students in my room were very, very smart. One young man, I remember, I wanted to beat him up because he was too smart. I had never had a chance to really ask a question. And I really wanted to be the first student to have this question, and he blurted out my answer. He shouldn't have really been in my class. If that was the day, he would have been in a regular ed class. And yes, I was one of the fortunate ones. And I remember saying to my mom, "Where's all my friends going? Tanya's not home." "Loretta, she's not coming home anymore." She was a child like me with intellectual disabilities. The only thing was different than her, she didn't speak well. But I could go to Tanya and talk to her. She would walk around and she would fling, and they would say she would have something called autistic. They didn't even use that term then. Everybody was in one big barrel. Loretta, Tanya's gone. Then another student would leave, and another one. Where are they going? Then I knew that my sentence was coming. When I was hauled off to the hospital, tested, had my brain waves done, go to this person that was different than my sisters, go to that person that was different than my sisters, I knew something was happening. And I remember seeing a movie as a teenager, and it was about Jewish people, and it was about a young kid during the Holocaust, and they were telling this young kid that you're going to go to a special school. That made me think back in my childhood when kids were disappearing and going to institutions. It was no different. Here, I thought I was going to private school. Ha, 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 ha. And my mother later says, "Loretta, you thought you were going to private school, but where you were going was to hell on earth. What's any different?" And as time went by, I remember my mom not being included because of the color of her skin. I didn't think I would have that same problem because I looked like the regular kids. But obviously, I didn't fit in that puzzle. And as time went by, as a child, I wanted to be an athlete, I wanted to be a nurse, and I wanted to be a veterinarian. Young people, if you're under the age of 50, you don't know what it's like until you had lived in those shoes of a person with an intellectual disability or any challenging disability. And when I look back, I think about those times. I lived a life of fear, and how I communicate was no, not with my hands, not with sign language. I didn't learn that till later. I was always told, you ain't going to be this, you ain't going to be that, you ain't going to be this. I even heard one statement one time from my own family members. "Yeah, you'll always be home. You're not going to do nothing. And I don't know why you keep trying to do something." That was by a sister. That sister today looks for me. And as time went by, I fulfilled my mom's dream. I did graduate from high school. But I was still living in anger. I was still using my fists. I was still using my feet to get by. I thought that's how I was going to live my life. I was in 10th grade, and they came up with a program called School to Work. I would go to school a week, work in the shelter workshop, preparing myself for my future. Those of you who don't know shelter workshops, I thought I had the dream. I was working with people who were just like me, and I wasn't getting called names. Well, there was some animosity there too, and that animosity came because of the color of my skin. But that didn't get far, so I almost picked up a wrench and almost took a guy out of here. I said, I'll put you 6 feet under the world in a heartbeat. Come on, mess with me. Call me the N-word again, and I'll take you out of here. That's just how I lived. Well, my mother got told, you're just a trying woman. You holding on to that child, she's going to end up killing you. That's what she got told by a counselor. But my mom had that strong grip. She knew that I could fear her real fast. And I would always set back. 10th grade, I got called into an office by the counselor, and all the people in the workshop said, oh man, that crazy one's out of here. Best thing that ever happened. I looked at the guy, and when I walked in the office, now what did I do? He says, Loretta, it's not what you did. You didn't do anything. It's what I want to show you. You just live so angry. Why don't you put those hands down? Why don't you use those feet? I see you running all the time. I've been running since 1966 with my brother Hank. Leave me alone. Settle down, Loretta. That man's still living in your county. His name is Mr. Lee Gilreath. Lee Gilreath had the ticket to my life. And that ticket was a paper that said Special Olympics. I couldn't even read it. I could read the word Olympics because one of my dreams, when I watched TV every 4 years, I would sit, and my mom knew that she wasn't going to have no problem out of me for 12 days watching the Olympics. She knew where Loretta was. She didn't know where Debbie was, out there running after the guys. Hank, she knew he was at work, getting ready to go to the military, to be a Marine. Alan, he was his own thing, if I went down the line. But she knew for 2 weeks where I was. She didn't have to worry, so she thought. That ticket called Special Olympics was a change in my life. And that counselor at the workshop, when I would raise my voice or I would pick up a wrench or something, he would say, Loretta, Special Olympics. All those psychotropic pills that messed up my part of my health today and my teeth were no longer needed. He had the magic pill called Special Olympics. And at that time, we had one event. It was in the spring. We start in the summer, and we would practice. That was 1970. I could be myself. I could be an athlete. Now, mind you, I have to start running in 1966 with my brother. Special Olympics only had little sprints and swimming. And I remember those days. You had to be at the workshop to go. And sometimes I would have to get out of school if there was a free school day and go to the workshop and practice. A year later, I was going to the state games, and the counselor has noticed there was no fist. There was no anger. And when I did get angry, Special Olympics. It calmed me down. At the same time, a year later, I started martial arts, 1971. That was a no-no, the counselor called my mother. You need to get her out of that martial arts. You know she has an anger issue. Get her out of there now. My mom in a big brazen self says she only has the same anger issue when somebody's messing with her. So if somebody keep her lips off and their hands off, they won't have no problem with Loretta. I don't have no problem. And as time went by, the hands started to drop. I became an athlete. As years went by, I started to speak. I met a woman, 1972, in Los Angeles, California. I was running a meet, and her name was Eunice Shriver. And I remember running in that meet. This girl cut my lane. I was getting ready to have a big burst, and the counselor says, grab Loretta, get her out of here now. Because she knew I was going to either tear myself up, being angry, or get this girl. And I looked over, I can see the girl in the red outfit. She had cut my lane. I could have been in first place. I was very angry, and as we walked across the field, I met this woman. And the counselor says, Loretta, see that woman? I want you to stay here. She's going to come over here. And I could see her mingling in front of the crowd. And she came up to me and said, hello, how are you? And of course, I had to keep my P's and Q's because I knew the beeline back home, even though my mom didn't have a phone. They would have called back to York, Pennsylvania. We'd have been sitting there with that strap. I'm okay. I did good. The lady could read through my mind that I was mad. She knew I was upset. And as time went by, I flew home, and I thought to myself, gee, I can't believe it. I went to California. Nobody's in my family's ever been out of this project. 8 years later, I'm at a race in Washington, D.C. I see this older woman mingling through these people. We were having a Marine Corps marathon, and it was a Special Olympics division, and this woman had seen me run. Of course, with my left eye is my eye I read with. My right eye is my distance eye. I had the correction in my eyes. It looks like I'm looking at you normal, but actually I'm not. And I remember running this race and running into this guy because he gripped me on my left side when I was focusing ahead, and I tripped. And I ended up coming in second. And I seen this lady weaving through this crowd, and the woman who was with me as my hugger then, the term we don't use anymore, we use teammate, our partner. I remember this woman saying to me, stay right here, Loretta. This other woman comes up to me, and I look at her. It looked like that lady I met at the track meet. And she stood there, and she looked at me and she says, I see you're a very good athlete. Wow. My name is Eunice. And I remember her talking to me, and we stood there for 35 minutes. And she says, one thing to me that tricked me. I want to be your friend. And I looked back. Would you like to be my friend? She gave me a little card. And it said, Special Olympics Incorporated, something, something, K Street. Would you write me? And I said, I never had that happen. Someone who wants to be my friend. As time went by, things started to change. Special Olympics started to change. It started to grow. 2 or 3 years later, I meet another lady who's portrayed in that movie, Janet McFarland. She was for the Ark in Pennsylvania. And she looked at me. She got a call from the governor, and the governor's wife said, I need somebody to come to run and be the person to represent the Ark, and it has to be a person who has a disability. And she looked at Janet McFarland. Janet worked in Harrisburg for the governor's office, and Janet kept getting these calls about this woman that lived in York, Pennsylvania. And Janet McFarland says, I don't know every retarded black girl in York, Pennsylvania. And the governor said to Miss Janet, you get that woman to come. She knew I was a runner. I had ran the Boston Marathon. And I'd never forget this. Miss Janet called my mom. And my mom says, Loretta, that lady that you went to her house, she keeps calling me. I think it's respectful for you to go with her and run that race. No, Rita, I'm going to do my bowling tournament. Well, my mom put the pressure on me that day. Same day as my bowling tournament, this woman comes over. She gets me. I get in her car. I get my running stuff that I had buried on the bottom of my bag, and I went to run in this race for the Ark of Pennsylvania. The Ark at the time stood for the Association for Retarded Citizens or Children. The Ark today stands for the Ark. There's nothing behind it. It's not an acronym. It's like the YMCA. Thank God. When I look back and I think of that Janet, she says, Loretta, I see something in you. You can speak. And I said, That was the starting. we would go to schools. They were starting to bring people out of institutions. Loretta, I think a couple months later, she says to me, there's a group forming. And I said, huh? She says, I want you to go to it. It's for people like you. It's for people with all kinds of disabilities. I think you could talk to these people. Who would ever think? It was called People First. Our group was called Speaking for Ourselves in Pennsylvania. Years later, in 1990, those small groups came together. You heard the woman say here earlier about those small groups, the base, coming together. And that spearheaded those little tiny groups, like the one I belong to, spearheaded ADA in 1990. And one of the young men, Mr. Thornton, from our group in Pennsylvania, down in King of Prussia, was there. Talking about inclusion, the schools started open. Miss Janet had me going to schools and speaking and telling young people that people like me can learn. They were coming out of institutions today. When I look back at how things has changed. But people, we still have a long way to go. I look back at Special Olympics, a one-day event. Today I serve on the board of directors. Mr. Stein, Miss Joanne, the woman who introduced me, they worked on the educational committee with me. Miss Joanne did on the board of directors. I don't pull no punches because I know, and I always think back to the time when I didn't have a chance, when I thought my destiny was going to be held in an institution. And I look today when now I have a chance. And the wonderful chances that those young people who sat behind me last night, are going to have. But it's up to us. We got to work together. We got to form a society where everyone is included. I like to be included, not excluded. I tell people in a heartbeat, oh no, you ain't going to exclude me, but you're going to include me. And if you're not going to include me on a happy note, I'll go elsewhere. When I look back at Special Olympics and where it's at today, we have become an inclusive society through sport. We now have programs into the school. Mrs. Stein knows, Dr. Stein knows that how the importance of people working together. We decide to go down to the younger students and educate them about the R word, how it hurts. Then all of a sudden those students get older and they can become a part of unified sports, where they and regular ed students can compete on the same basketball team and learn about each other. We use sport as the vehicle to drive, that's our car, to drive inclusion into our schools. And today, with the rise of autism and Asperger's, to me, when people look at me and say, disability, I don't got that. I said, well, you know what? One time or one day in your life, if you live long enough, you will be disabled. So don't even go there. And so for you to look at me and describe me as, oh, you know those people with, I hate to embarrass you, Loretta. I said, well, come on, say it out. I said, because I'm going to get you back. You leave your darn label for the jar that's on the table. And the same person who said that to me years ago has had a stroke. That sister who said to me, oh, Loretta, you walk behind me. You don't walk with us. Just had her knee replaced. I said, Debbie. She says, Loretta, this is hell. I said, Debbie, just think about the person who lives with that day in and day out, from the day of their birth to the day of their grave. Welcome to the world, Debbie. Now you got a new view. And that's basically what I'm saying to everyone. When I look at Special Olympics today and how much it's grown, healthcare, biggest disparity of persons with intellectual disability. I was told I wasn't going to live this long. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm 62 years old. I guess I exceeded my time. And I still run, and I still exercise, and I can challenge anybody to a push-up race down here. But when we talk about being inclusion, and last week I was so upset because I was told, oh no, it's 30 days, you can't apply to vote, you can't do an absentee ballot Till Monday, I went to a conference for people with disabilities, and I was telling this man, I'm not going to be here next Tuesday. I'm upset I can't vote. I'm just so mad. And he looks at me and says, Loretta, you can pre-vote. I said, huh? He says, no, you can pre-vote. Well, you bet your bottom booties. I was down to that doggone courthouse. I went to the voting registration. I said, excuse me, I know I can't sign up to vote. I'm going to be away next Tuesday. I said, is there such thing as pre-vote? She said, yes, ma'am. Send me up to another floor, get my papers approved. And I went down, I sat in this room, filled out my ballot, closed the envelope, put it on the thing, and I voted. And I turned around to the lady, and I said to her, you know why people don't vote? Because you, as an office, don't advertise that there is pre-voting. I never hear you advertise, and I work with voting. I'm up there doing the grill, putting the signs together, putting the letters together, and I tell them in the office, when we had our new governor, you need to do more to advocate for people with disabilities and all disabilities to vote. All people, you're terrible, terrible, or how you advertise this. I said, I just found out through a man going to a disabilities conference that I could pre-vote. Talk about inclusion in all ways. I never forget when I lived in the high-rise apartments. They had made these high-rises for senior citizens. Then they just started to bring people with intellectual and physical disability. And the disparity that was there because the people who had brought us into this high-rise didn't make it happy. Almost got kicked out of there. But I was lucky. I was blessed to be able to move. So when we think about inclusion, we have to think about health care, better health care for people with physical and intellectual disabilities. We're always saying inclusion into schools, but we need inclusion through all parts of life. I remember being with Mr. Mandela in South Africa, and everybody in our delegation wanted to go into the prison. I didn't want to go there. And some gentleman said to me, you're not going to go in? You know how that's an honor? I said, sir, no, you don't understand. I said, because I could have been incarcerated into an institution just because I didn't learn as fast. So I sure as hell don't want to see a man imprisoned and where he lived at for 27 years because he believed the rights for all people of his country. If you want to take my place, you can be glad to take it. Last year, a year ago, I never forget sitting at the table with the President of the United States. Tim Shriver, it was me, my advocate, Tim Shriver, and some other people there. And I remember the President saying to Mr. Shriver, I look at this country and I look for civil rights. In the last 10 to 15 years, people with same-sex agenda has come so far. It won't happen in my term, but it will happen. Mr. Shriver, you have been fighting for the rights of people with intellectual and physical disability all your life, and it still hasn't happened. This was the President of the United States of America. I sat there and the President tried to get me to laugh. And I looked at him, I said, Mr. President, I had to get up there and speak because I do not use notes. But that was the most powerful thing I've heard in a long time. Still in this country and around the world. There are some places people with intellectual disability can't even own a cell phone. Ask Dr. Stein. I went to his conference 2 years ago. There are some places where people with different disabilities can't even hold a bank account. So we have a long way to go. 2 years ago, I went to the United Nations and spoke on behalf of people with intellectual disability, being a part of the ratification for people with disability. They weren't included. Nielsen ratings does not include people with intellectual disability. But I let them know that we do buy and we do consume. Ladies and gentlemen, think about it. We have still a long way to go. The Ruderman Foundation and its family, you're getting us on the right foot. Thank you. Thank you all so much, and may God bless and keep you well. Thank you.